All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's Zinc customer webcast. As you know, we've recently announced some new product updates to the Zinc all-mode communication platform, and we want to spend today just about 30 minutes going through those with you, make sure you have a good understanding of how they work and how they could benefit your organization. My name is Nicole Sanders. I'm going to be moderating today's event. I know most of you know how this works at this point. We are taking questions at the close of the session. You can submit those at any time by using the Q&A panel on GoToWebinar. You just click on the small orange arrow to submit your question. We are also recording today's presentation, and it will be made available to you in the next 24 hours. So today, I'm happy to have with us here in the room in our San Francisco headquarters, John Stedick. He's our Chief Product Officer. Probably many of you have spoken with John in the past. He is here today with Edward Saavedra, our sales engineer. And John's going to talk about the new products and features available in Zinc 5, and then Edward will be doing a demonstration of each of those features sort of as John talks about them. A little bit of a back and forth show and tell, if you will. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to John to kick us off.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Well, so as you all know, as users of Zinc, you've been experiencing Zinc for some time, and the notion of all-mode communication platform is something that's really starting to take off. It allows users to work in real time and get information and share information in real time. And we're really excited with our new version 5 that we've released, which has some significant updates across the whole platform, including introducing a whole new mode of communication, push-to-talk, as well as a whole new mode for you to be able to operate in, which is hands-free, communication analytics, so you can see more how the product is being used and how your teams are communicating, and of course the modern, fresh UI. So Ed and I are really excited to give you a little bit of a tour about all these new features and just talk to you about how they work and what kind of benefit they bring to your organization. So of course this notion of Zinc as a single intuitive platform is core to the way that we build the product. We always focus on mobile first for your deskless workers and be able to enable them to have real-time communication through any mode that they want to be able to communicate in. And obviously, being mobile first, purposely built for deskless workers, which is really focused on how do we make a communication platform that is very powerful and very flexible, but also very, very easy to use so we can drive high adoption across our user base. And of course, Zinc is enterprise grade as an enterprise communication platform, giving you the security, the scalability, and the integrations that you need to have it be part of your broader infrastructure. And so these are the key design principles that we use when we think about how we can evolve Zinc. And as we said, we're really excited about the new features that are in version 5 that really start to drive all of these forward. So most of you are familiar with the broad capabilities. We're just talking about all the capabilities of Zinc in this as this all-mode communication platform. And it's really divided up into 4 key areas. We have team communication, corporate communication, communication analytics, and the enterprise platform. And so for most of you, you're obviously all familiar with the messaging capability and likely some of the voice and video calling that we have within team communication, as well as our broadcast feature is a whole new mode of communication that allows you to do that one-to-many communication across your entire employee base, be able to sharing out content. And then analytics is a whole new piece with, of course, then based on the foundation of our enterprise platform. So in today's conversation, we are going to be talking about push-to-talk, so walkie-talkie-like functionality that's now built right into the platform, as well as the communication analytics that we're now providing to you. And then we'll be finishing off with our new hands-free feature, which some of you may have known we had before called Voice Assist. We've renamed the feature based on some user feedback, and now it's integrated in with the new UI that we have also released with version 5. So let's start off actually with that modern UI. So for us, operating in a mobile environment and making sure that the product is very intuitive and easy to use, but also very fast and efficient to use, continuing to enhance and drive our UI strategy is critical, of course, across both Android, iOS, web, and desktop. And so some big changes that happened within the UI themselves is you'll notice our compose button has gotten a whole facelift. This just makes it faster for you to start different modes of communication. So simple click on the plus button now gives you access to all the different modes of communication that you have available within version 5. Previously, in older versions of Zinc, when you click that compose button, it was assuming that you wanted to start a message. And what we found was that a lot of people, it was harder to start different conversations across different modes. So now, by giving people the option to start the conversation in any mode that they want, then it makes it much more efficient to start those conversations. And we like to think of all-mode communication as allowing people to select the mode of communication that's best for the environment and the context of the conversation that they're actually having. So that's one big key change within the UI. We've also made a bunch of standardizations and consistencies. So for example, you can see up here in the top right-hand corner, at the top of every screen, there's a little plus button, which lets you start something new within that mode that you're in. So in this case, when you're on the conversation screen, clicking that button up at the top allows you to start a new message conversation. If you're in the broadcast screen, clicking that same plus button up at the top with a little broadcast icon lets you create a new broadcast, if of course you have broadcaster rights. And of course, a whole new UI for push-to-talk, which is really focused on making it very efficient to be able to switch between different groups of people that you actually want to have ongoing conversations with. So that's a quick little tour of the modern UI. But now let's move over to push-to-talk, which is one of the real pillars of our new version 5 release. So push-to-talk, as most of you probably remember back in the days of Nextel, as a common way of doing a push and a little beep, and then you start talking and your voice is getting streamed over directly to your group. It gives you immediate access to individuals and groups and allows you to communicate over voice. So think of it almost like being able to send text messages, but now it's much more real time. It's not quite a phone call. It doesn't require the commitment to dial and it to ring and someone to answer. It's just a case that you push a button, you talk, people hear your message. They can respond back as soon as they have a second to respond back, again, just through a simple push and click or push and talk. And the beauty of the design here is that you can actually listen on multiple channels as well. So you can be listening on just a single channel, or you can add multiple channels and be monitoring those multiple channels at a time. So if you're working, say, in a dispatch center and you want to be able to monitor the conversations across different teams, you can have those loaded into your UI. And then you can actually you could quickly mute all the other conversations and just focus on a single conversation. And also, unlike traditional radios that some of you might have used in the past, where radios are limited to a preset number of channels, everyone needs to be on the right channel to go get that message. With Zinc, you basically have an unlimited number of channels because all of the channels are actually teamed off of our groups. So if you create an official group or an ad hoc group or even a one-to-one conversation, any of those groups can act as a channel for push-to-talk. And of course, we've integrated it in with Bluetooth as well, so you can be using a Bluetooth headset to be able to hear audio messages, as well as some really cool little push-to-talk Bluetooth low-energy buttons that you can use, so you can keep the device in your pocket. And if you want to be able to push-to-talk, you simply just press the Bluetooth button, wait for the beep, and you start talking, and your voice is broadcasted out. So what does this mean for you as an organization? So depending on what type of industry you work in, there's lots of different advantages of it. For example, if you're in a type of industry that leverages radios quite a bit, like say, for example, hospitality or some aspects of construction, being able to avoid the investment in radio and the ongoing maintenance that radio comes into play and the siloed nature of a radio network, that you're now able, for a lower cost, to be able to give your teams an all-mode communication platform that can also allow them to still operate like they're using a radio. Of course, as I mentioned, being able to have freedom from the channel limitations that you would typically have on radios is also a really nice benefit to give you more flexibility with how you use it. And then finally, because now push-to-talk is one of the modes within the all-mode communication platform, we make it easy to be able to switch back and forth between different modes. And of course, the advantage of that is you can now pick the mode of communication that best suits the environment that you're actually working in. So with that, Edward, why don't we take a look at how push-to-talk works?
All right, thanks, John. Okay, guys, I'm going to show you what this looks like in action. So first thing you'll see is the new UI, this new refreshed look, where you've got a number of changes that John highlighted here. You've got the new icons that make it really easy to scroll through and visually find the conversations that you want to be interacting with. I personally really enjoy this as a way to quickly recognize people's faces, find the conversations that I'm trying to get access to, and do that in a way that's just much more efficient than it previously was. The other thing you'll notice here is that I've got this new component along the bottom that says listening to all channels. So this is an indication that I've got push to talk turned on and that I'm listening to all of the channels that I've selected. And the way that I can access that feature and configure it is, of course, with this compose button that now gives me access to all of the major modes of communication that Zinc provides. So I can go and start a message like I could previously. I can call or video call one of my colleagues. But what I'm going to do now is go into this push to talk mode. This brings up a whole new card that allows me to manage my groups that I'm interacting with over push to talk. It allows me to toggle this on and off. And what you'll see here is that I've got a few different types of groups that I'm interacting with over push to talk. I have an official group, this District 4 support group. So this is one of those groups, of course, that's configured from the admin console and that's managed centrally by your organization. But I also have unofficial groups like this United Work Order group. So this is a group that was just spun up from probably from a mobile device, from some of the employees out in the field who just needed to quickly, in an ad hoc way, start a conversation. So whether you're working with official or ad hoc groups, push-to-talk is compatible with those. I can also have one-on-one conversations over push-to-talk with my colleagues, as I do here with Rich and Amy. And I'll show you what this looks like in action. So for example, if I'm a tech out in the field and I need some kind of support, I don't know who's going to be available. I just need to get a quick sense of who's online and who might be available to assist me. I'd simply tap on the District 4 support group, hold it down, and send a quick message. Hey, I'm encountering a little bit of a problem here. Anybody available to help?
Roger, Nicole's here. What can I help you with?
All right, it sounds like my colleague Nicole is available to help, so I can send off another message and start explaining the situation. And of course, like a normal radio or push-to-talk device, we're going to keep this to short bursts of communication. So this isn't for long, in-depth conversations. This is for quick bursts of communication, short updates, getting a sense of who's available, and troubleshooting quick problems. Now, of course, the nice thing about this is that we have these other modes of communication. So as the problem is diagnosed, you might need to move into another mode. For example, if we get to a situation where I need to actually show what's going on with the device that I'm working on, I can simply switch out of push-to-talk, go back over to the actual District 4 support group, and maybe send off a photo to help diagnose the issue. So the integration of these different modes in a single group makes it really easy to cater your communication to the environment that you're in and also the level of sophistication of the challenge. Now, the last thing I'll show you is what it looks like to actually manage these groups. It's really easy to do. All I need to do is go into Manage, and I can go ahead and remove groups. I can add new groups here. I can search for any conversation that I have, any individual that I'm working with, and it makes it really easy to start a new push-to-talk conversation. And of course, as mentioned, I can listen to all 4 of these groups at the same time, so I don't need to selectively pick one conversation to be tuned into. And as mentioned before, I can attach different Bluetooth devices to this, so there's some neat ones out there that give you really convenient access to your push-to-talk conversations. So that is push-to-talk. I'm going to switch back over now to John to continue the next segment.
Great, thanks, Ed. It's great to see that actually in action and be able to communicate all of that over a webinar as well. We've got real multi-mode communication going here. So the next area that we want to focus on is communication analytics, and this is a really interesting differentiator that Zinc provides in the market, which is really about giving you insight into both how Zinc is being used within your organization, who are active users, and actually interesting insights as to what people are discussing and what are the hot topics within your organization. So we provide a couple different visualizations that you can actually see. This is all accessible through the administrative console and is limited to people with only org administration access. So this is more protected data, so only certain people can actually see it. So with our engagement views, you can actually see what's the volume of messaging that's actually occurring, who are the most active users. The report that I really like is actually taking a look at conversations and seeing what official groups are actually the most active official groups. And what's actually really interesting is being able to look at the ad hoc conversations that people create. Typically, people gather together around a certain topic or a certain issue, and there's this grassroots movement that starts to bring people together in a conversation. Previously, administrators of Zinc weren't able to be aware that those other conversations were actually happening. And what we found with some of our early customers using analytics was they discovered some really interesting conversations that were happening, like around product troubleshooting, help groups, Q&A. So the field had actually created these grassroots groups which brought people together to help solve different problems. The challenge was, because it was grassroots, it didn't have a broader support and a broader organizational awareness that these groups were actually happening. So by being able to be aware that those groups were happening, being able to talk to the people participating in their group, understand their needs and why this group got created, it allowed people to actually be able to create more official groups and be able to get a little bit more regimented as to how questions and answers were actually getting solved within the field. And this whole notion of being able to measure your communication is really a key piece to be able to do continuous process improvement. We all drive a lot of our businesses by having key performance indicators and driving efficiencies through our processes. But a lot of times communication is really the grease that drives the process machine forward. But previously, that has been an unmeasurable part of your day-to-day activities. And so now with communication analytics, Zinc is really the only player in the market that's actually elevating those communication to something that can be measured, and it can be something that is part of your overall business process improvements. So Edward, do you want to give us a quick little tour about some of the reports?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch over and look at some actual analytics here. So I'm going to show you the Zinc company analytics. So you'll see a little bit of a tour of how we're using Zinc internally, actually. We've got a few windows within the analytics panel in the admin console that give you different insights into what's happening across your organization in terms of communication. And the first one is the engagement window. So this gives you a sense of volume of messages. You can see how much are people communicating. Are people increasing in their communication? Do you have dips or periods of inactivity that you can look into? It gives you a good holistic view of how much your employees are getting in touch with each other. Now, you can also see a good view of how many users you have, if your communication environment is growing, if people are adding other users. And this is especially helpful for larger organizations where you've got multiple admins who might be adding users in, and it gives you a good sense of how your organization is growing. The other interesting thing here is that you've got some good visibility into individual usage from individual users. So you can see who your power users are, who are the people who are really communicating a lot. Those are often the people who are sharing information out, who are go-to resources when people have a question. So this is a good way to identify those high-performing communicators. So you can see that John here is actually our heaviest communicator here, and there's a bit of a long tail of people who don't communicate quite as much, and he's sending a ton of messages. So this gives you some interesting insights into how individual employees are using Zinc. So that's the engagement analytics. I'm going to hop over here to the conversations analytics, and this is actually one of the most fascinating ones that gives some brand new information that really there was no way to get access to before. So you can see some information here about your official groups and the activity that they've had over the last 100 days. So this gives you a sense of what are the most recently active groups that people are using, and then what are also the ones that have the most messages in them. So of course, our all company group is very active recently and continues to have a ton of messages in it. You can see which groups are declining in activity, the ones that may have been very active a while ago, but are now kind of falling out of use. So that gives you some interesting insight into what's no longer a priority and what are new priorities. But what I think is really interesting here, and John mentioned this, the named conversations. So not the official groups that you actually set up through your admin console here in the official groups tab, but these are the ones that people are creating ad hoc in the field and are giving them some name because they have a specific topic that they're covering. So here you can start seeing the things that are coming up at a grassroots level, and you can see what are the recent big conversations. Okay, looks like there's a pretty recently active one on push to talk that's been quite heavily used. So that's something interesting to see that you wouldn't be able to see by looking at the official groups previously. So this is one way to spot trends in terms of potential products that are having a lot of troubleshooting questions around them. We've seen that happen before, where a group will pop up to address an issue with maybe a device that has some kind of faulty part that people keep asking about. You can start seeing those things and addressing them at a company level rather than just having them be isolated communication bubbles that pop up and go unnoticed. And you can see the actual names of those conversations. You can see their level of activity, how many people are in them. It gives you a lot of new information about what's happening in these ad hoc conversations. So the last tab that I'm going to show you here is the network diagram. So this actually shows you a view of who the individuals are in your organization, who they are communicating with, and what kind of groups you have forming across your organization. So this is the actual Zinc org. So we communicate quite heavily with each other. So you'll see that the larger circles here are the people who send a lot of messages. That's message volume. And the lines connecting them are the messages sent between those users, with the weight of the line showing how much communication is going on between those users. So for an organization like ours, we tend to communicate pretty heavily all across with each other. There's not much siloing between our departments, so we've got a pretty dense circle here. But as you start looking at larger organizations where you have a little bit of siloing going on, you've got groups that start to form, you've got maybe some employees who've been there longer who tend to cluster together, you can start seeing some interesting trends around where information is flowing in your organization. And one of the most important things here that I take a look out for is looking at the people who are isolated and outside of the circle. So for us, this is some addresses that we use, like help@zinc.it. So these are going to be a little bit more disconnected than the actual employees who you'd see here. But sometimes you'll see in a large organization that there are new employees who might not have been, maybe haven't been brought into the fold as much. They're people who are maybe communicating with other methods and are missing out on information, but it gives you visibility into where you've got dense communication and where you've got outliers. So this is an interesting visual way to see what communication really looks like across your organization. I'm going to pass back to John here now to get to the next section.
Great, thanks, Ed. That's a great tour to sort of see how it all works, and it's interesting to see how we use Zinc as well. And obviously, I'm a very active Zinker, which is great. So let's finish off right now with hands-free. And as I mentioned, some of you may have seen some information about hands-free in a previous release where we called it Voice Assist. Based on some feedback, we've changed the name of it so people really get a good sense of what it does. And really, it lets you use Zinc in a hands-free mode. So whether it's voice or text messages, basically Zinc will read it to you out loud, and even if your phone's locked. So there are a couple of really great things. You can turn on Voice Assist and then be able to catch up with unread messages. So let's say a technician has just come out from a job and there's a couple of messages that they've got to catch up on. They can just simply turn on Voice Assist, they hop in the car, and Zinc will actually read the messages that they haven't caught up on yet. So it allows users to really stay focused on the important tasks at hand. So even if they want to be able to keep up with a common or with messages that are actually occurring while they're working, they could just even stick on a headset and just be monitoring the conversations that are actually happening. This is really great from a manager's perspective as well. So the manager can be busy doing their job, but also being able to keep track of the conversation without always having to be glancing down at their phone. You can also be able to respond to messages in a hands-free mode right from the conversation screen. So you simply just push and press and hold on a conversation, and that will send out a recorded voice message out to that group. And then, of course, being able to actually choose how long do you want this on for. For example, when I'm commuting in the morning, I flip on Voice Assist for an hour, and then as I'm in transit, I just get my messages read to me, and I can follow along with Zinc conversations almost like I'm listening to a radio station, as it were. And then when I get into the office after my commute, then it just automatically turns off. Or you can set it to be able to turn off at the end of the day, or you can keep it on for as long as you want until you manually turn it off. So Ed, why don't we just give people a quick look as to how this actually works.
All right, let's switch back to the demo here. So it's really easy to turn on hands-free mode here. I'll just hop into my settings and toggle on hands-free. As John mentioned, I can decide how long I want to have this active for. Maybe I'm just going to be commuting for an hour, and I'll select for 1 hour. Maybe I'm an employee who works with a headset in my ear all day, and I can turn it on until the end of the workday. I'm just going to turn it on for now until I decide to manually turn it off. As John mentioned, you can catch up on unread messages. So I've got 14 unread messages that I've got to catch up on. So maybe as I'm driving in between jobs, I'll click yes here, and the phone will read those off to me so I can get caught up on any information I may have missed. For now, we'll skip that. I'm going to go over to conversations, and you'll see there's an indicator at the top that says that hands-free is turned on. I'll show you what it looks like when I actually get a message in one of these groups.
Brandy via safety update says mandatory safety meeting moved to Wednesday.
So you'll see visually there I got the message as an actual text message, so I can see that this was a text-based message that someone sent over to me in a group, but because I'm working in hands-free mode, I got that message as a audio message. So if somebody else is working from their desk, but I'm working on the go, we can still communicate with each other really easily. The other nice thing about this is that I can actually send a message back simply by pressing and holding on that conversation. So that makes it really easy if I'm moving around and I don't have time to actually open up the conversation, send a message, or do anything like that. I can simply hold that down on that conversation. You'll see that's the little bit of the message I sent there. And this is really nice too if you're working off of a headset and you can actually send a message into the active conversation simply by pressing the button on your headset. It makes it really easy to work in a hands-free way. So that's what hands-free looks like, and I'll pass back to John to conclude the presentation.
While they're transitioning over there to the last bit of slides, just wanted to mention you can go ahead and submit your questions. I think we'll maybe have a minute to answer one or two if you have them.
Perfect. So the last thing that I want to touch on here after we've covered a bunch of this great functionality is our new help center. So this is something that we launched in the summer, and we continue to drive our users towards the help center to get information that they need, especially if you're an administrator or someone responsible for Zinc in your organization. It has information for administrators as well as your direct users. So at the top of the help center, there's important updates. So anytime we do significant feature releases, there'll be a release overview that's listed in this important updates and gives you information that you need to understand what's new within this release. So whether it's release overviews, how-to articles, demo videos, the full administrator guide, and we're starting to add more and more best practices that actually are industry specific as well in using the Help Center. So if you haven't visited already, I do encourage you to go visit help.zinc.it. This is linked from the administrative console as well as the mobile apps. If you go into settings, you can scroll down and go to help, and you can actually get right onto it on your phone, and it's a great mobile design, a mobile experience on the phone. Full text search to be able to search for things that you want, and you can even rate the articles too, so you can be giving us feedback as to whether those articles actually were helping you solve your needs. So of course, as a company that's focused on creating a great communication platform, we want to be able to make sure that we're communicating out to our users effectively. And so we continue to do webinars and outreaches, but as well want to be able to make sure that you have the right self-serve options to get the information that you need at the time you need to do it. And of course, our team is only a Zinc away too. So what are your next steps? Here's a couple of suggestions as to how you could start to get more out of Zinc and look and exploring all the new features within version 5. So send your teams a broadcast to check out hands-free. If you go to the help site, there's a great overview of what hands-free is and how it works. And so you could even broadcast out to your team a link to that help site so they can go through it and read how it actually works. This information, when it comes from your organization, is great, and it gives your users some understanding that, yeah, this is a feature that we should be actually working with and using. We, of course, communicate also out to users, but we try to do that in a very minimal amount, so we don't want to be over-communicating to your employees. But if you want to be able to encourage a greater use of the hands-free capability, please feel free to send out a broadcast to let them know to check that out. Also, for those of you that are organizational admins, we encourage you to go into the administrative interface and run a report and see which groups are most active. Find out something you didn't know about the usage of Zinc. I think you'll be amazed at the unique insights that you can actually gain by looking at how people are communicating within your organization. And finally, for those of you that are interested in push-to-talk, our push-to-talk mode is an add-on capability for Zinc. So if you'd like to learn more about it, talk about it specifically for your organization and hear more about it, feel free to reach out to your customer service manager, or just feel free to Zinc us as well, whether just hit zinc.to/Zinc team, and we are available to answer any questions. So I see we're getting close to the end, and we've got a couple of questions in the queue that we'll follow up with directly. But if we want to just summarize where we are with Zinc and really the mission that we're on here is that we want to keep employees in the know. And we want to be able to make it very easy for employees to stay in the know and for managers and corporate to be able to give information that employees need. So we focus on how do we allow employees to share tribal information as well as allow organizations to broadcast out corporate information, providing you then the analytics that you need to measure your communication and, of course, the rich, secure platform to do that on. Our ultimate goal is how can we make you as an organization more efficient and more effective, which drives ultimate financial results and helps you through your business transformations as you start to become a more efficient and a more effective organization with sharing information and better communicating across your entire workforce. So we'd like to thank you all for your time today. So on behalf of Nicole, Edward, and myself, thank you for being great Zinc users, and thanks for giving us half an hour of your time today. And as I mentioned, if you need anything, we're just a Zinc away.